The Warriors just completed a wildly successful road trip. They've eliminated most of the doubt surrounding this team and whether or not they're for real. Folks, they're for real. And I've got Sophia Jones joining me to recap that 4-1 road trip while previewing Klay Thompson coming back in town. There's a lot of interesting news items pertaining to that and much more. But let's get into it. The Golden State Warriors are title contenders again. Feelings are good here in the Bay Area. This is the Golden Days.
They always find something to nitpick, and that's because there's expectations for us to win. It was a pretty crazy night.
Let's go.
In a minute, I'ma need a sentimental man or woman to pump me up. Come on and break me off. 'Cause I get what I want and I like what I see.
Even Bubba's excited. He's pumped about the Warriors. How could you not be? They're legit. Good title for Steph. What? Welcome to the Golden Days. She is one of the two hosts for this afternoon, Sophia Jones. You can follow her on Twitter at Sophia Jones_2. You can follow me, Cyrus Saatsaz, on Threads and Instagram at Dog Wild, over on Twitter at Surf Journalist, and the program is on all social media platforms at Golden Days Pod. Before we get into it, Sophia, first, got to give some love real fast to the official sponsor of Golden Days, and that's Bet Online. And side note, before we continue on, if anyone out there runs a business or an organization and you want to partner up with us for a sponsorship, the door is now open. We're about to crack 3,000 subs, and all you got to do if you're interested is email us at warriors24pod@gmail.com. If you're out there and want to have a mutually beneficial relationship, we will do our best to make you happy, and we will satisfy. I promise you that, including with our current sponsor, Bet Online. We have a great relationship with them. They're the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting, from the earliest odds to in-game live betting. Bet Online provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen, with the largest selection of odds on everything from football, NBA, college basketball, NHL, UFC, MMA, and much more. Head to the website today, Bet Online's website more specifically, to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. Sophia Jones, great to see you. How are you doing? And your immediate reaction to the Warriors kicking some ass at OKC and finishing what was initially thought of as a very daunting road trip. They come home 4-1. They're looking good. How do they look to you, and how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and they look really strong to me. I mean, when you talk about beating the Boston Celtics on their home floor and the Thunder, albeit a little shorthanded, still on their home floor, still one of the best teams in the Western Conference, have to be feeling good coming off of this 5-game road trip, finishing 4-1.
Absolutely. And folks, like individuals like Mike Weisberg in the chat will bring up some facts that may temper expectations a bit, bringing up the fact that the Warriors beat the Celtics without Jaylen Brown and Kristaps Porzingis. Chet Holmgren got injured early in that game yesterday against the Thunder, and that was a brutal injury. We'll talk about that in just a moment as well. But the point is, teams are always injured. This stuff is always happening, and this is a huge reason why the Warriors have a dynasty, which, side note, is still going, folks. Dynasty's not dead yet. It's still alive. It's kicking. It's got a shot for a 5th championship. But a huge reason for this dynasty has always been strength in numbers. I think maybe 2017 through 19 might be a bit of an exception because they were so top heavy with Kevin Durant, but they still had depth even those years. The point is, Mike Weisberg, you're right to a certain extent that these other teams that the Warriors are beating have had some injury issues, but everyone's got injury issues from beginning to end. It's rare for teams to be top to bottom healthy, and that is where the depth of this team is vitally important and crucial when we're having these discussions. And it's why, Mike, we're not pumping the brakes. At least I'm not on the title talks. This was a test. They've got more tests coming, but so far so damn good. Sophia, what do you think? Do you agree with Mike where we should maybe hit the brakes a little bit, or are you feeling good about this team like a lot of people are right now?
I'm feeling good about this squad, and especially I think you can even look back to this Thunder game where even though they were shorthanded, this was the 5th game of a road trip for the Warriors, which it takes a toll on the body in that sense in itself. I honestly was surprised that so many of the heavy hitters played as they did. So I think that's a point to be made in itself.
You're absolutely right. I'm totally with you on that. And that game against the Thunder last night, we did we recapped and covered a lot of it on last night's post-game show, and I can't thank the audience who shows up to those things enough. It really is a party. It really is a vibe and a celebration. Those post-game shows are awesome. So thank you to the audience. But we're following up a day later now, and the we didn't know last night how bad the injury was to Chet Holmgren. We did not understand the severity of it until Shams Charania broke the news late last night. And there's been follow-up stories about it today as well, that he's likely out for the year. And the injury that was caused because Holmgren went up to try to contest an Andrew Wiggins drive. Side note, that Andrew Wiggins drive and the Wiggins we're seeing this year looks an awful lot like the 2022 version. That injury that happened to Holmgren was in a lot of ways because of Andrew Wiggins and the force he brought to that drive. That was very reminiscent of 2022 when Wiggins was that just dominant force, grabbing boards, making those tough buckets. He made a huge bucket at the end of last night's game after he missed 2 crucial free throws. D'Anthony Melton, another success story. We're going to talk about that in just a moment, but he grabbed an offensive board on a missed free throw, one of the hardest things to do in basketball. It's inexcusable on the other team's end, but that's what the Warriors did. Melton grabbed the rebound, missed the putback, but then there was Wiggins not giving up. He put the bucket in. This was at the end of the game to seal it. The point is, Wiggins is a force, and Chet Holmgren sadly learned that the hard way. He suffered a right iliac hip fracture. He fractured his hip, Sophia. And following up the report, there's going to be a return to play protocol announced in 8 to 10 weeks. What that means is that in 8 to 10 weeks, we're going to find out the severity of this. It doesn't mean he's coming back in 8 to 10 weeks. This is likely going to be a season ender for him. Sophia, your reaction to Wiggins just being the version that we remember in 2022 and the crazy play that resulted in Chet Holmgren likely being knocked out for the year?
No, I've really been enjoying watching Andrew Wiggins this year. Even back into that Celtics game, you saw that matchup with him versus Jason Tatum. He was kind of getting back to that defender that we knew him as. And even for him as a player, it's not all about his shot making all the time, but just his activity in general. So him being active on the boards, being a lockdown defender, that's the part that's mostly, to me, reminiscent of the 2022 Andrew Wiggins. But for that play, it's extremely unfortunate with Chet Holmgren. He's a shot blocker, and he maintained so he has to go up. He tried to block it. Andrew Wiggins, again, just explosive, but it's a really unfortunate play. You hate to see players go out that way. Even watching the game, when he stood up and tried to walk it off, he couldn't even put any pressure. So really, really unfortunate for that. Prayers up to Chet that he recovers, but you have to really appreciate the aggression that you've been seeing from Wiggins on both ends of the floor recently.
Big time. And I love how we have doctors in the chat saying, oh, he might be back in February, March. He's going to be back this season, like any of you know. Look, he fractured his hip. That is a very severe injury. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing about all this, but it was just a crazy play. And that's a very serious injury. It would shock me if he did come back this season. And like I said a moment ago, 8 to 10 weeks is the time frame for just when we're going to find out where he's at in terms of a recovery, in terms of when we could actually expect him. Folks, I'm personally telling you, it would shock me if we saw him this year. He might, you never know, but that's a very serious injury. And I do hope, on a side note, that Chet Holmgren is okay. And then you have Ishan in the chat bringing some levity, saying Chet called Wiggins a mofo in the hospital for that play. I mean, look, Wiggins is a force. I mean, you got to be aware of that when you're going up trying to stop him. This Wiggins that we're seeing, if it's striking a lot of resemblances to that 22 version, who was dunking over Luka, who was just owning the Celtics inside. It's crazy if this is the version we're getting again, but so far, so pretty much good. Sophia, what did you think about the rotations last night? We're going to hear from Draymond Green in just a second, who talked about the team's depth, which has been a massively huge story this year. But Kevon Looney didn't play at all. He was DNP'd. Trace Jackson Davis got a whopping total of 4 minutes, 43 seconds of playing time. Kudos to the coaching staff. I gave them props last night. I'm going to give them props again today, Sophia, that they are aware of these matchups. They're not forcing anything, and this is where the depth is clutch. They realize the Thunder were going to be playing 5 guards out there most of the night, and the Warriors were like, you want to play that game? We're the best at it. Let's go. And you didn't see bigs, and it didn't matter. What was your reaction to seeing small ball and full fours kicking ass last night?
It's reminiscent because I feel like we for so long have talked about the Warriors. They need a big, they need someone to be able to be a shot blocker in the paint. And this was one of the only times this year that really paid off because Warriors perimeter length, because we were able to play players like Kuminga, like Moody, because of their length on the perimeter, that really helped to kind of dissuade OKC. And it was really fun to see, especially me as a guard. I like watching guard play and that type of offense. So it really worked out to the Warriors' favor. And that's why they went up as big as they did in that game as well.
Totally. And one of the many interesting things we saw last night was DeAnthony Melton in the starting rotation. He also finished the game. He looks healthy. I feel like that last night was the first time we saw a 100% DeAnthony Melton, and it was beautiful. I mean, I feel like he kind of cements his role on this team as a starter. I don't have much of a problem with it. Steve Kerr said after the game that he envisions this being the starting lineup moving forward. What are your thoughts on DeAnthony Melton starting? And last night, just to summarize his performance, again, he played just shy of 27 minutes, 19 points, 10 rebounds, 6 of those coming in the fourth quarter, a +8 with net rating. He was also 5 of 8 from beyond the arc. You have to love what you're seeing with this guy. Your thoughts, Sophia, on DeAnthony Melton starting and his performance?
No, I'm a really big fan of that, especially looking at that backcourt with him and Steph Curry. It really helped to open up things for Steph. I mean, he finished with 36 points. He was 13 of 23. And you don't get to have all those looks when you're handling the ball the majority of the game. So the fact that Melton was kind of able to take some of that responsibility, I feel like really helped Steph in the end of the day.
Agreed. Wholeheartedly agree. Pinoy format in the chat, adding, did anyone see Terry Stotts talking to Kerr before they called the timeout to replace Gary Payton II with Kuminga in the clutch? I don't remember seeing that, but I believe it. And I think it highlights a bigger positive for the Warriors, which is they have some damn impressive assistant coaches. Sophia, just to remind people out there, you played D1 basketball as a point guard for the San Jose State Spartans. So you know firsthand how important coaching is. What are you seeing with the added influence of Terry Stotts and Jerry Stackhouse this year? Because I'm seeing a massive difference in terms of substitutions, the right players playing. What are you seeing from that?
No, exactly what you said with the substitutions, the players that are on the floor, and as well as when you talk about Stackhouse, he really helped to revamp this Warriors defense that is now one of the best in the league, which is something we could not say in previous years. So the work that he's been able to put in on defense has really been kind of the backbone, I feel like, or one of the backbones to the resurgence of this Warriors team.
Hell yeah. And Jay in the chat saying that DeAnthony Melton is going to be like Gary Payton II in and out of games due to injury. And look, unlike past years, if that does happen, they're going to be okay. That's the beauty of going 13 strong on your roster. It is wild. And Tim Ford bringing up the Steve O thing, because last night on last night's postgame show, Tim Ford kept saying, Cyrus, say Steve O, Steve O. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I don't remember ever saying that. And now he remembers it was actually someone else, a former guest of this program, Greg Silver, Mike's son. He used to come on regularly before a bigger entity, a bigger institution stole him away from me, but that's okay. That's part of the job. I'm happy for Greg to be achieving success at KNBR now. But I want to play this clip, Sophia, This was after the game last night, and this is Draymond Green going into detail about the depth of this Warriors squad. They are deep. Strength in numbers. By the way, side note, I was curious about where that adage came from, and at least from my brief research, if the information is correct, apparently Steve Kerr created that adage himself back in 2014-15. Strength in numbers. Damn, is it real? It's real with this team. And let's hear from Draymond Green talking about the specifics of what this depth brings to the table for this Warriors squad. Here's Draymond Green after last night's victory over the OKC Thunder.
You know, oftentimes when you're talking about depth, you're talking about how deep you can go. And obviously, you know, just the short amount of guys you can play. But the main reason depth is important because you remember last year, Steph and Steve talking about the lineups and just kind of running out of options of lineups that we can go to. And this year is the total opposite. You know, if we need to go small, we can go small. We need to put a shooting lineup out there. We can put a shooting lineup. We need to put a defensive lineup. We can put a defensive lineup. We need to put a big lineup. We can put a big lineup. You know, and so definitely makes a difference a night like tonight where, you know, they played 5 guards all night pretty much. It's good we're able to have that adaptability.
You're damn right. Your reaction, Sophia, to the fact that if the Warriors want to play big, they can play big all the way. Although that brings up another topic we're going to discuss in just a moment. But if they want to get defensive, they can get defensive. If they want shooters, they can have 5 shooters out there. They are diverse. Sophia, your reaction to Draymond's comments about the team's depth.
Yeah, you mentioned the diversity of the roster, and I think it really shows too that when they were building and putting these players together and developing them, having a role and identity for every individual player is really important, because since some of the players even we saw last year have the younger guys, they've developed and they've kind of develop their own role, basically their own identity, so that when Steve Kerr has a specific job that needs to be done, he knows who to get and he knows who works well with each other, because there's not as much to question, which again, we mentioned with the assistants, that's where, because they have so heavy of a hand in player development and all that, I think that really helps to be able to construct and put out the best producing lineup based on what individually every player is going to bring.
Hell yeah. It's beautiful to watch so far. Sal Paradise in the chat adding that Terry Stotts has made this offense more unpredictable, at least according to Sal, saying that the offense was getting a little stale. I don't know if that's true, but regardless, this team is looking really good. And the one thing that did stick out a little bit in terms of what Draymond said, and I'm not saying it's incorrect, but Sal Paradise mentioned that OKC has no bigs, and last night they pretty much did it. I know they had some reserves on the bench that they went to for brief moments here and there, but Chet Holmgren, Isaiah Hardenstein, those are their 2 centers. They're both out, and it brings up a question of whether or not this Warriors team can handle bigger front courts, and I guess that's where I'm still not 100% sold yet. I'm not ready to go on a top of a mountain and scream, the Warriors are winning the title this year. I'm not quite at that point yet, just because I still need to see the Warriors play the Lakers and beat them, right? A fully healthy Lakers team. I need to see them play Minnesota. Nikola Jokic is having a Wilt Chamberlain type season statistically. And now look, the Warriors have proven they could be a thin Nuggets team back in 2022, but still, I mean, that's a force. I need to see those tests pass still before I can be 100% sold on this Warriors team. But that's just me. Sophia, are you as I don't know if concerned's the right word, maybe intrigued by the Warriors in terms of how they can match up against bigger teams? Are you fully sold? What's your take on this Warriors in terms of facing additional tests out there with bigger squads than the Thunder?
It's almost not as much of a question if they can match up on the perimeter, because I actually feel like when we do talk about putting out a Warriors lineup that's bigger, some of our longer players, like a Jonathan Kuminga, like a Moses Moody, they're longer. Even Andrew Wiggins, they're longer. So perimeter-wise, they can defend. But when you have a big and dominant force inside the paint, that kind of like you is where I still have my reservations and our ability to just really put out a big lineup.
Yeah, and the Mavericks are going to be a test, and we're going to preview that game in just a minute because Klay Thompson's coming in town, and that's a big deal. Real fast, just because I like to address as many questions as possible. I'm curious, Sophia, what your thoughts are on Brian_RT's question, which is that I haven't noticed this, but Sophia, I don't know if you have. And Brian's writing, have you noticed that every time Kuminga has the ball, he ignores Buddy Hield wide open from three? No, I have not noticed that. There were people last night, a few people bringing up that Moses Moody was being ignored, not necessarily by Kuminga per se, but sometimes when things are going good, you start seeing comments like these, little nuanced nitpicks. I personally don't think there's anything to this, but I wanted to address it anyways. Sophia, do you think Kuminga is ignoring Buddy Hield? I don't see that, but just bringing it up to address everyone. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in watching the games, I haven't personally seen that as well. Yeah, I can't really think of too many instances where I thought they probably should have passed it to Buddy for the shot. I feel like sometimes you just got to give what you feel like the offense gives you, the defense gives you.
Absolutely. I don't see it either. And look, here's what I'm confident of. It's not intentional. A lot of times Kuminga is driving full force to the basket. You might see people wide open. Like someone showed me this video from the game last night where Moody was open and Kuminga just attacked the paint because he was driving and the defense wasn't prepared for it. And Moody was open, but it doesn't mean that Kuminga was ignoring him. Kuminga just saw lane and he saw an opportunity and he took it. It doesn't mean these things are intentional. It's just sometimes players have options and you might notice that he didn't pick the option that you like or you think makes most sense. But in these split-second moments, it is hard to go back and play Monday morning quarterback in that sense. But I'm not seeing it personally. I think the offense is running fine. The ball movement to me is exemplary. Last night, the Warriors had 35 assists collectively. That's a good number, folks. And they scored 127 points against the top-rated defense in the NBA. So I think they're doing okay personally. I want to share this stat as well, Sophia, because I think it is fascinating. And the stat pertains to all-time Warriors franchise history point differentials, meaning in the entire history of the Warriors, certain teams have been able to blow the opposition out at a better clip than others. These are your top 5 all-time Warriors teams in terms of best point differential through the first 10 games of the season. In 2015-16, when they won 73 games, sadly they didn't win the finals, largely because the NBA stepped in and rigged it by suspending Draymond Green and handing the series and the momentum of it to LeBron James and the Cavs. I digress. The point is, in 2015-16, they were a plus 171 through 10 games. The 2021-2022 version that started 18-2, they were plus 137. They won the championship. The 2018-19 Warriors are third. That was Kevin Durant's last year with the team. They were plus 135. We know what happened there with the injuries and so forth. Fourth on the list is this version of the Golden State Warriors, the current incarnation. They are a plus 119, and rounding out the top 5, the 2014-15 Warriors, the original strength in numbers, were a plus 103, and they won the championship. When you see this, Sophia, what are you thinking? Because I'm impressed, and it's just leading more and more towards the thinking that this team is for real. Your thoughts?
I'm with you. I think that as many of us might have put them off at the beginning of the season, I think they're now actually a force to be reckoned with. Even looking at some of these numbers, I'm looking at the specifically 21-22, and I think it's worth noting that, especially with the progress of the NBA, where the games are a lot more points, it's a lot higher scoring. So the fact that the 24-25 this year is still in there above with such a long time span, it shows a lot. It shows that this team is good, that they're beating some of these other opponents. And even if you look at last game, they were up big versus the Thunder. So that even could have been a couple more notches up for that 24-25 graphic year. So I think that this is something that is a good trend and pattern that needs to be recognized.
100% with you. And I'm sorry to the audience that Sophia and I agree on so many things. I know it's not as entertaining, but look, we're both simpatico. What do you want to hear from me? Here's why I push back a little bit on folks who think that the strength of schedule has been somewhat weak and that the great teams the Warriors are playing have been dealing with injuries. But I'm looking at, for example, the Dallas Mavericks, right? And they played a mutual opponent in the Utah Jazz, for example, a team the Warriors easily took care of. And the Dallas Mavericks only beat them by 6 or by 8. I'm sorry, 110-102. The Dallas Mavericks couldn't beat the Houston Rockets. They lost to them at home, 108-102. Whereas the Warriors took care of business. That's an example of the Mavericks, who the Warriors are going to be playing next. The Phoenix Suns, who are 8-2 at the top of the list. When you look at their schedule and the teams that they've played this season, and you compare them to similar opponents, like for example, they barely beat the Portland Trailblazers, 103-97. They barely beat the Philadelphia 76ers, 118-116. Those are games that they should have easily taken care of business. And my point is that these teams that some people are calling weak, that the Warriors have played, they're not as bad as you think they are. Good teams blow out bad teams. That's why I wasn't really concerned with the early part of the season, because if these games were close against teams like Portland, against teams like Utah, I would be definitely more refrained from feeling good about the Warriors. But they're blowing bad teams out. They're beating good teams. That Clippers game, they want to take that one back early in the season that they lost. My ultimate point is I'm feeling great about it. I'm not concerned about the opposition to start the year. I think you could see enough from 10 games to be feeling damn good. Any final thoughts, Sophia, before we start previewing the Warriors-Mavericks game coming up tomorrow, which is a huge one? But any final thoughts in the first 10 games for the Warriors? 8th of the season in the books. The Warriors are 8-2, tied for top of the Western Conference. I know the West is deep, and just to provide some perspective, in terms of the standings right now, only 2 games separate 1 through 9. All right. So I understand that the West is deep and it's going to be a long season, but the fact that the Warriors are taking care of business like they're supposed to is a great sign to me. Sophia, any final thoughts on the Warriors through their first 10 games?
When people talk about strength of schedule and, the Warriors aren't necessarily playing some of these teams at full strength, the Warriors were also without Steph Curry for a part of the stretch of 10 games. And they beat the Pelicans twice convincingly and the Rockets convincingly. So I think when people recognize what's happening on the other side, they also need to recognize what's happening on this side and acknowledge that Warriors have been dealing with injuries as well. You talk about DeAnthony Melton just coming back and he was out, he's a starter. So that's a huge piece that they were missing.
Great points. Absolutely right. I'm feeling good about this team is what I'm trying to say. And they're playing the Dallas Mavericks tomorrow. They're reigning Western Conference champions. I look at the Mavericks, Sophia, and color me not impressed. What I mean by that is, like, if you look at their actual roster and you look at the depth of this team more specifically, their starting 5 is solid. Don't get me wrong. I mean, Luka Doncic, perennial MVP candidate, already a future Hall of Famer. Kyrie Irving, future Hall of Famer. Klay Thompson, future Hall of Famer, and then PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford are a hell of a front court. We still don't know if Derek Lively is going to play in tomorrow's game, and that is important. But when you look beyond Derek Lively on the bench, no one else impresses me. I mean, no disrespect. I know Jaden Hardy is a decent player. Najee Marshall is a decent player. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Maxi Kleber by now, but again, none of these players, Spencer Dinwiddie is lucky to still be in the NBA. He comes off their bench. None of these players scare me. Like, I look at the Mavericks in terms of their bench, and then I look at the Warriors, and I'm thinking to myself, the Warriors could blow this Mavericks team out of the water, and the Mavericks might be a team that struggles just to get into the postseason. I don't feel good about this Mavericks team. I don't know what the line is yet. I'll look it up while you respond, but what are your feelings about the Mavs? Like, do you think it's going to be a tough fight tomorrow, or do you think the Warriors, and we could talk about the home part of the game as well, because the Warriors, for some weird ass reason, are not playing well at home, and that's a whole other issue. But if they take care of business like they're supposed to, I think they could easily demolish the Mavericks. But that's just me. What do you think about Dallas, the Golden State Warriors opponent tomorrow?
I feel like it is going to be very game plan driven. You talk about the top three on the team, Luca, Kyrie, and Klay. And there are just certain instances where they don't all really play as cohesively as they should on offense. And I feel like there are certain things that the Warriors could potentially do to exploit that. People are talking about that. Klay Thompson, he's not the same. He's not shooting as great this year. And that's because sometimes it's hard if you're a shooter and he's used to being able to come off of some off ball screens, come off some staggers, and at least have movement. But there are a lot of times when I watch the Mavericks and he's standing in the corner while Luca or Kyrie is dribbling at top. And sometimes that works, but the Warriors could potentially just exploit that and take advantage of it. So I could see the Warriors again winning pretty convincingly, especially after having a little bit of rest coming off of this road trip. But overall, I also think that I really do think it might be a close game because of the amount of emotion that could be present.
And Nick the Greek in the chat, and I jokingly say that because we've had some fun back and forths, writing that this is a trap game. Just following up what you said, Sophia, that the Mavericks will be motivated, that they're going to want to play for Klay Thompson, and that could be the case too. I'm looking at this strictly from a roster to roster comparison, and I think the Warriors on paper should take care of business. The bookmakers, and more specifically in this case, the official sponsor of Golden Days, Bet Online, the line is out. Sorry for the redundancy there. The Golden State Warriors are favored in this game by just 3 points. The over-under 232. I personally would feel great about the Warriors covering that spread -3. But again, that's gambling for you. It could be a trap game. It could be one of those games where it's set up on paper to make you feel like the Warriors are going to crush them, and then Dallas will pull off an upset. And again, the Warriors, Sophia, how do you attribute the home struggles? Like, they were a 500 team at home last year. They've only played 3 home games this year so far, which is part of the reason why the first 10 games, them being 8-2, is impressive, is because 7 of the first 10 have been on the road. But they're 2-1 at home. Last year, they were 500 at home, practically. It's bizarre to me that they don't rise up at home like they do on the road. What that tells me is the chemistry is fantastic. When they're on the road, they're friends with each other. They're getting along. And then I don't know what's happening at home. I don't know if like the wife and kids are messing things up. I don't know if the people are getting too comfortable. I'm being facetious saying that. The point is, and I would have said the opposite if this was WNBA. I would have said, you damn husbands out there, what are you doing? The point is, I don't know what's going on at home. Do you know, as a former D1 player, like, can you make any sense of the Warriors not being as good at home, which is not the norm?
I don't know if I really can. There is, especially when you look at the trend of players playing at home, that's when typically you see that improvement, mostly in role players. So like the bench, but the bench has really been what's showing out on these road games.
Yes, it's crazy.
It's crazy. And I think that it could be something, maybe a sense of complacency when they're playing at home, because they've accomplished so much history here in the Bay Area. And I really could not say, truthfully.
Do you think Matt Brotherton has a point? Although my pushback to that is Rocco was there last year. Matt Brotherton in the chat that it's saying the lack of not having Rocco, and I know you're being facetious saying that, but Rocco was in the building last year. So I don't know if Kuminga needs to make Prada and Dior, his 2 French bulldogs, a regular presence at the arena. I don't know. I love dogs. Dogs always make life better. So as long as they're not hostile and biting you, obviously. So I agree with the logic, even though it doesn't totally make sense, because Rocco was not in the building, or was in the building last year. So who knows?
You know what? You talk about logic. I'll actually bring up an experience where last year when I did an internship at NBC Bay Area, and I covered the Team USA gymnastics meet that was at the SAP Center in San Jose. And we did a story about that they had a therapy dog there for all the gymnasts because it really helps to calm all their nerves. And so I don't remember the dog's specific name, but it is actually a dog, a golden retriever, really cute one that follows the team around to help the girls just ease their nerves. So I think there's a little bit of science to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then people in the chat are jumping in with opinions. Bruce Morrow chiming in saying that Oracle was better. That Warriors fans are in the concessions in the third quarter, meaning that the fans themselves are not as passionate rooting for their team. There might be some truth to that, although the Warriors did win a championship at Chase Center, and those fans were pretty awesome. But I totally agree that there's a difference between Oracle and the team. That Oracle was just special. There's no other way to spin that. Steve O Knows writes that Cali weed be hitting different at home. I can't argue with that. Sophia, I won't ask you for your opinion there. I won't put you on the spot. And then Cool Breeze saying that he knows what it is. There's very little feet room in the stands. It's uncomfortable. It's not as loud. Sophia, do you think the arena itself has something to do with it? I would say it's more the people in the arena than the arena itself, but that's just me. Do you think the arena itself has anything to do with it?
I don't really think so. In my experience in being a part of the crowd at Chase Center, I actually think it's one of the more comfortable of the NBA arenas. I've been to my fair share, and I think that it's more of a reason to keep people in their seats. And I would even say that when you think about some of the seats in the upper bowl, it's actually built in a really nice way where since it's so steep and built up that you're looking down at the court and you actually get really good views. So
Yeah.
I don't think it's a part of the construction and the build of Chase Center. I would think it would be
I totally
people.
agree. Now, if you want to bring up the fact that the tickets are much more expensive and that brings in a different clientele and fan base, I would agree with you there. Who knows if that's making a difference? But it is weird that the Warriors at home are just not as good. Let's hope that trend changes. And look, Klay Thompson's coming home. I don't know if Rocco's with them. It would be absolutely amazing if somehow we saw Rocco. I think that would move people to tears. But I don't think Rocco is on the road with Klay. But Klay himself, there's been a couple stories that came out recently with some very interesting attributions from Klay Thompson. Courtesy of The Athletic, Klay is quoted as saying, quote, "It'll be good to see people you grinded with, obviously, but to me, it's just another regular season game in November." That's courtesy of The Athletic. And then from Antscape, and more specifically, Mark Spears, who, by the way, side note, thanks for coming on the show, Mark, over the weekend. That episode is currently live. Strongly recommend checking it out. I'm going to make a story from it as well pertaining to a very important note that Mark brought up in that interview, which is that Steve Kerr, the constant revolving door of assistant coaches is by design. And Kerr was inspired to do that from Greg Popovich, who has a similar practice. And the purpose of this practice is to constantly have a fresh perspective as a coach, right? You're constantly bringing in like new ideas, and that's what different people bring to the table. And I respect that tremendously. I loved hearing that from Mark, and for Steve Kerr to be emulating Popovich's practice of that increased perspective by constantly changing up your assistants, I think that's awesome. That is a tip of the cap to Steve Kerr there. But the whole point of bringing that up is because of Mark Spears. Do you have any opinion on that, by the way, Sophia, about what Mark revealed on that episode, which is that Kerr has this rotating door of assistant coaches by design? I mean, I know Bruce Morrow is distracting me from Bruce Frazier. I know Bruce Frazier is the exception to that. But what are your thoughts on that? I think that's awesome of Steve Kerr to be constantly challenging himself and bringing in these fresh perspectives. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've never heard of that before, but even if you kind of look at that situation as a microcosm for what happens in real life, where as many people from different places that you bring different perspectives of, it's beneficial at the end of the day. And in a basketball sense, you can, as a head coach for Steve Kerr, with all these different assistants, even though they go, you can still keep their ideas
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
So I think that's a very smart thing to do.
100% with you. I loved hearing that. And again, that was a fantastic episode. Strongly recommend checking that out. Thanks again to Mark Spears for coming on the program. Add some prestige to this channel. And anyway, so Klay Thompson told Mark Spears in a story recently published on Anscape, which is a part of ESPN, quote, "That chapter is over. I'm in the midst of trying to win here in Dallas. There is no point in missing anything when we have such a great opportunity here to be great. There is no point in looking back," unquote. I think you're picking up on the theme here, which is that Klay doesn't want to be sentimental. He doesn't want to revisit the past. His focus is on the present. His focus is on Dallas. Now, Mark Spears did say on NBA Today, the Malika Andrews hosted program on ESPN, that I watch almost regularly just because this is one of the best shows to have on in the background while you're making breakfast or lunch. And so Mark was talking about the fact that Klay is like intentionally not getting into his feelings about this, which is, to each their own. Everyone has their own strategies for how to cope and deal with things. But I thought the most fascinating information that came out, besides these quotes, was Anthony Slater reporting that Steve Kerr and Klay Thompson over the summer, before it was official that Klay was leaving for Dallas, they met for, I believe, lunch in Manhattan Beach, which is where Klay Thompson was. Steve Kerr lives in San Diego in the offseason. Him and Judd Bushler, Bruce Frazier, they're surfing. They're having the time of their life in the summer down there. Steve Kerr made a trip up to Manhattan Beach, had lunch with Klay, and explained to him his future role with the team, which was going to likely include coming off the bench, reduced minutes. And Klay heard this and was like, "I'm out." That was his response. Like, "No, I'm good. I'm out." And he told Steve Kerr then that he wanted to go to Dallas. And look, in hindsight, this was a mutually beneficial breakup, I think, for both sides. Needed to be done. Klay did not feel valued here in Golden State and wanted one more big payday. The Mavericks gave him that, thankfully. But Sophia, your reaction to all of this, Klay's indifference to the magnitude of tomorrow's game, and his decision to leave, at least partly, according to the story, because he didn't like his reduced role. Your thoughts?
To address kind of Klay's indifference, like you mentioned, definitely to each their own. But I feel like there is a certain part where you have to acknowledge the history and the big of a deal that this is. But honestly, at the same time, for me as a player, I went through 2 ACL injuries, so I kind of understand a little bit of what Klay Thompson could potentially be thinking, because he had an ACL and an Achilles, where sometimes it helps to not make something as big of a deal as it actually is. If you kind of downplay it for yourself, it helps approach it in a more clear mindset. At least that's my perspective. And as a player, you really do just want to approach each game the same way. When you start getting too much into the highs and lows is where you find inconsistency.
Mm-hmm.
So to a certain extent, I kind of understand what these comments from Klay mean. Your story about when him and Steve Kerr met, I think that was a good conversation to be had, because it could have gone a certain direction where Steve Kerr maybe didn't tell him what his role was going to be. And then when Klay was actually in that role, he was very unhappy. So that's kind of how I look at the situation, where Steve Kerr laid all his cards on the table and Klay just didn't like that. And sometimes that happens.
Yeah. And as Pinoy Reformat in the chat writes, Klay was probably thought he was going to a team that gives him a better chance of winning. Take a look at the standings. Sophia, would you agree that even though it wasn't like the official trade or anything, but ultimately when you look at the transactions this offseason, the Warriors essentially swapped Klay Thompson and Chris Paul for Kyle Anderson, for DeAnthony Melton, and for Buddy Hield. That's a massive win of a swap. Would you agree, or do you still miss Chris Paul and Klay Thompson a little bit?
I think that Chris Paul wasn't really a good fit for the Warriors. And I feel like with Klay, his mind wasn't, or at least that's how it seemed to me. It didn't really seem like he was in it anymore, which, like I said, for me, where I went through to kind of catastrophic season-ending injuries as well, where
Mhm.
sometimes you're just ready to be able to step into another chapter and leave that portion of what you have to go through because it's a really, really hard time. You're just ready to leave that behind. So I can kind of understand it in that aspect, but yeah, I think that the Warriors, for especially looking at it now, they were able to have a pretty successful offseason.
And that might be a gross understatement, right, Sophia? I mean, and that's not a criticism to you. I'm just saying, like, it ended up that good, right? The end result, even though the Lindy Waters trade wildly exceeded expectations, we still have no clue if Quentin Post is going to be a player. Talk about an exclamation point if he suddenly shows up and reveals he can play. I mean, you're absolutely 1,000,000% right about this offseason being a massive win, which is why I give a tip of the cap to Mike Dunleavy Jr. And maybe a tip of the cap should also be given to this ownership group. I have no reservation saying this. The Golden State Warriors have the best owners in sports. Would you agree with that or disagree with that?
I honestly don't think I know enough about other owners in sports. However, looking at the ownership group that Golden State has, and I'll say Golden State because that includes the Warriors and the Valkyries.
Yes.
I think that they're just doing a lot of things the right way from basketball and just kind of in the community with their messages in general.
And I know some fans might be, disapproving of the team's move from Oakland to San Francisco. And I could get that gripe to a certain extent. That was a business decision. But look, this is an ownership group that cares about winning, that is still leading a dynasty. Sophia, I grew up with Eddie DeBartolo as my unofficial uncle in life. He was running the San Francisco 49ers, one of the greatest dynasties in professional sports history. And his entire focus was constantly looking ahead and winning. I know Joe Lacob got a lot of heat for his light years comment some years ago, but damn, is it showing to be prescient considering what this team is doing now. So I just want to give a tip of the cap, not just to Mike Dunleavy Jr., but to Joe Lacob, because he's had a lot of critics out there. But what I want in an owner is someone who cares about winning, who doesn't sit on his laurels, who isn't focused on the business side of things only. And we've got that. So if you're a Warriors fan, I think we've won to have an owner who actually cares. No one's perfect. I really believe that. I mean, look, and no one in the chat is coming up with another name. Like Bruce Morrow is saying Jerry Jones is the best. I don't know if the fans would agree with that, and they haven't won in 30 years. So, and I don't know if you're being facetious saying that. You might be. It's incredible. I'm super happy with Joe Lacob's ownership. Wrapping things up here, Sophia. Any thoughts on anything you want to add to that? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to dominate.
No, you know what? Just kind of in general, you can really tell when an owner is not just obsessed with the business side and they actually kind of care about everyone in the organization and the organization's community as a whole, which I do think that Golden State does a good job at.
Oh, totally. And I mean, we haven't even seen the Valkyries yet. They debut next year. It's just props to the Lacobs and Peter Guber, who's the quiet half of the 2-member ownership group. Peter Guber, side note, in case you're not familiar, he literally, I'm not embellishing, exaggerating, he was literally the producer behind Batman, the Michael Keaton one. So that was him. His name's in the credits and everything. So I'm thrilled with this ownership group right now. A couple chat questions just to finish up. And this is pertaining to tomorrow's Warriors Mavericks game. Mohammed Alavi earlier in the show asked this question, that Draymond Green and Trace, or it's not a question, it's a statement, but something we could address, that Draymond Green and Trace Jackson Davis struggled against Daniel Gafford. This was last year. Look, Trace Jackson, I want to see this again. I'm looking forward to this matchup. I think Trace Jackson Davis can hold his own against at least most of the game's elite bigs. I think he can hold his own against Daniel Gafford. I'm not going to worry about last year. That was a totally different team. I do think if Kevon Looney gets extended minutes against Gafford, that might result in bad things. Pay attention to that, because you've heard me say that a lot this year, that Kevon Looney struggles defending other bigs. focus on that. If you watch tomorrow's game, I'm curious to see how that goes. But I do think Draymond and Trace Jackson Davis can handle the Daniel Gafford, PJ Washington assignment. What are your thoughts on that, Sophia?
I think that they'll be able to also. I mean, you talk about if Kevon Looney comes in, that doesn't even leave Draymond having to take that matchup a lot of the time, which puts him in a better position as well. So that's kind of my thoughts on that big center matchup situation.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to watch it. There's no doubt about that. I think that's going to be interesting. And Cool Breeze, great to see you. Finishing up the show, final. Unless anyone else has anything they want to add, jump in. But otherwise, we'll finish up with this one. Cool Breeze, excuse me, writes, who's guarding Klay Thompson tomorrow? My guess is it's going to be Wiggins. But then again, that's a good question. I mean, the Mavericks do present a daunting threesome for an opposing defense to deal with in terms of Luka, Kyrie Irving, and Klay Thompson. I actually think that they're going to probably hide Steph on Klay, right? Is that what you would think? I mean, I'm thinking about this. D'Anthony Melton will probably guard Kyrie Irving. Wiggins will probably guard Luka. And we've seen how that goes, right? I mean, the 2022, I know that was a couple years ago, but still, Wiggins, I think, is up to the task. So my guess would be Splash Brother guarding Splash Brother. What do you think, Sophia? I mean, when you think about the matchups, that's likely what it's going to come down to, right?
I think it could definitely come down to that, and kind of how I was mentioning earlier with the fact that a lot of the times you see Klay, he doesn't do a whole or as much off-ball movement as we're used to seeing him. So that could potentially be something where Steph could get a little bit of a break hanging out in the corner with his Splash Brother.
Hell yeah. I'm looking forward to that. And look at this. Muhammad Alavi will not let this show end without some fascinating trade talk with a trade proposal coming in saying, how about the Warriors and the Sixers make a trade where the Warriors get Joel Embiid and the 76ers get Andrew Wiggins, Kuminga, Moody, Looney, Pajemski, and 2 first-round picks. How about no? What do you think, Sophia?
I'm going to give that a no as well. I don't think that Joel Embiid would be the best fit for the Warriors. I know we, even on the Cavs post-game show the other day, we threw out a lot of Biggs names, but Joel Embiid did not leave our mouths.
I mean, I don't hate the idea of Embiid being on the Warriors, but I'm not giving that. That is such a massively huge package for an injury-prone center who you have no idea if he's going to even play come April. Again, not opposed to the idea of Embiid, but that is ridiculous. Sophia, do you think it's insane at the moment to even think about trades? Mark Spears over the weekend did think the Warriors should make one more big splashy move to get a type A star big. I don't know if they need to. I'm looking at the landscape. I still need to see the Lakers. I need to see Minnesota. I need to see Denver. I need to see teams that rely heavily on their front court for success and see how the Warriors can counter that before I'm thinking of a 5th championship for Steph. By the way, side note, I mentioned this on last night's show. Sophia, I don't know what you think about this. If the Warriors win a 5th championship, not only will I never criticize Steve Kerr again, he's forever in my good graces. He's immune to criticism for the rest of my life. I also agreed to get a Steve Kerr tattoo. What that means is anything. It might just be a tiny little Kerr on my body somewhere. I haven't even put thought into that. That's something I will not put a thought into until June, if that's a reality. But I will do that. I agreed. If the Warriors win a 5th championship, I will get a Steve Kerr tattoo. In addition to him being immune from all criticism on this program from me moving forward. Your reaction?
I'm partly speechless. I didn't think that was gonna come, but in terms of what Mr. Spears said, I still do think that the Warriors could afford to do that trade. Like we kind of both mentioned, there hasn't really been a big test by them yet of a front against a front court heavy team, and that still is one of my concerns. And I think that if we do see that test and they fail, that a trade should definitely happen. Yeah, as opposed to the tattoo, that's Oh, that's crazy. I'll keep it. That's
It
crazy,
is.
But
It is, right? It is absolutely insane. But again, that's how committed I am to this. So we shall see. We shall see. That's how much I look at Stephen Curry, and he's such a symbol of greatness. Like, he's such a once in a lifetime type talent. Like, I just will never diminish my appreciation for watching him not only just play during our lifetimes, but play for my team. And to me, and this has been a huge consternation and a reason why I've criticized Kerr as much as I have, is because Stephen Curry deserves that 5th championship in terms of legacy, in terms of arguments. And to me, again, this is just me, the Warriors should have had 5 by now. Like given everything they've gone through these last 10 years, 4 is not enough. Like, 5 will make at least this guy, this idiot right here with 2 thumbs pointed his way, a satisfied idiot. So that is what I'm rooting for. And I care so much about Stephen Curry's legacy that, yes, I will get a tattoo of Steve Kerr. And I even promised on last night's show it would not be somewhere hidden. Like, it's not going to be a butt tattoo. I'm not saying it's going to be on my arm or face, but it'll be something that I could show on camera to the audience. So that will happen. Yes. So there you go. Anything else, Sophia? I know you're speechless. It's okay. It's crazy.
No, I think that if that happens, then the reveal episode will be very interesting, to say the least.
Well, thank you to the audience as always. They are awesome. You really are. You folks are incredible. We don't exist without you. So thank you. I don't know what Brian_RT means with this. Don't forget Kyle on Luca. What does that mean? Like, what is he referring to?
Slow-mo.
Oh, Kyle Anderson.
Yeah.
Slow-mo. Yes. Thank you for that. Yes. I noted. Derek Simmons says hello to you, Sophia. And Muhammad Alavi adding, we should have won in 16 and 19. You're right. My frustration is more 2023. Like, I thought the Warriors, and it's not just Steve Kerr, but he was a huge part of it. I really thought they should have repeated as champions the next year. They had everything going for them. All they needed to do was right moves. They not only did not do the right moves, and this is where the front office deserves some blame too. I mean, you do not let go of GP2 at that point. That was moronic to me. But then you look at all the rotations, the lack of development. I think 2023 was just a bad year in my book for the Warriors. So, yeah, if they win this season, if they get a 5th championship, I bow to you. I will bow to Steve Kerr, and I will get a tattoo. That's how committed I am to this. So anyways, is that it? Any final thoughts, Sophia? Are we good? Are we done?
No final thoughts. I could definitely see, but by the caliber of a player that Steph is, he's a 5 championship caliber player.
Wholeheartedly. Yeah, that's how I see him too. He's just, folks, appreciate that you're alive when he's doing this. If you're a sports fan, you love basketball, this is special. So, yeah, with that said, should be exciting tomorrow night. We'll be back at it tomorrow night. Warriors Mavericks post game. Thank you again to Sophia Jones. Follow her on Twitter at Sophia_Jones_2. When can people see you next on ESPN Plus covering USF basketball?
Tomorrow, the women's team, we play Portland State at home. So it should be a good game. So that is the next time.
And is this going to be on ESPN Plus?
Yep, it'll be on ESPN Plus.
Beautiful. So, folks, check out Sophia on ESPN Plus covering the USF women's team. Are they called the Women's Dons or just the Dons?
Just the Dons.
There you go. The USF Dons women's basketball team will be on ESPN Plus tomorrow. Check that out. Sophia Jones is going to be a part of the broadcast. And regardless, come back tomorrow night on this program for Warriors Mavericks post game. I feel good about Warriors -3. I never feel good about recommending bets just because it's impossible to fully predict, but I do feel good about that. And I think the Warriors should take care of business, but we shall see. Thank you, everyone. Again, Sophia, thank you. You are phenomenal. And we will be back again tomorrow night at the latest. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Sophia. Bye.